Well, thank you very much for that introduction. And thanks to all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to come and listen to the presentations today. It's greatly appreciated by all presenters. So, Northern Superior Resources, who are we? Well, we're a junior explorer. We explore and we are focused on gold, primarily in the provinces of Ontario and Quebec in Canada. We trade on the Venture Exchange under the symbol SUP, and we also have recently joined the OTCQB under the symbol NSUPF, at the insistence of a number of American investors that we have down in the States. The company, of course, we've all read these safe harbor statements. There it is. The company has really gone through quite a transition over the last 6 to 12 months. Managed to bring the company through the downturn quite well. I was able to keep the integrity of our key properties in place. We had quite a bit of money still in the treasury, just under $1 million to see us through 2017, 2018. But we did start going through some fundamental changes November 2016, and that started with a complete changeover in the board of directors at that time. It was a bit of a surprise. I knew some of the older members were moving on, but when I showed up for that board meeting in November, I was greeted with a whole new slate of faces, so that was quite an interesting day for me. I have to say, though, that it's an excellent board. The old board was good, but they weren't vested in the company and they were not engaged in the company. They'd been there too long. The new group that I have is a great mix of financial people, great corporate governance, and also some very good technical people. Now, I haven't listed them here. There's 6 of them on the board. They're on the website. Their bios are there. If you're interested, you can go there to find out a little bit more about them. They're engaged people. One of the board members happens to represent Sprott on the board, a technical guy I've known for quite a while. They are on the projects, they're on the sites, they're involved with the company. So it's been quite refreshing to have that kind of support around me. The other thing was that we raised a lot of money between November 2016 and the Prospector and Developers meeting in Toronto in March, $6.5 million through 3 financings. We didn't have to work very hard to get it, which I thought was quite an acclamation from the financial community about the quality of project that we had within our portfolio, and also, frankly, just in management and how we've been able to move the company forward through these difficult times. $2 million came from a group out of Montreal, which was Quebec flow-through money, which is to be spent specifically on our Croteau S property in Quebec, which I'll talk about in a moment. Another $2.5 million we had started to raise in January. That book was filling quite nicely when Sprott stepped in with a $2 million hard financing. So over a very short period of time, we all of a sudden had a nice treasury that had been rebuilt very quickly and allowing us to get back into what we're supposed to be doing, which is exploration. And then focusing. We have been a project generator for many, many years. In fact, we can continue to do that today in a variety of different commodities if we need to. However, we have these 2 projects that I'm going to talk today around, Croteau and my TPK or Ti-pa-haa-kaa-ning project in northwestern Ontario. They're more advanced, they're ready to move forward. And we've started to do that certainly with Croteau, but with TPK, it's a large property position that you're going to see with 2 district scale mineralized components to it. So we're going to need help moving that particular one forward, but we're focused on those 2 projects right now. So let's get into it. Croteau Est. It is located in one of the best jurisdictions for mining in the world. This is the Abitibi Greenstone Belt, one of the most prolific producers of gold on the planet. We are up here in the northeast corner in the Chibougamau camp, which has produced an awful lot of gold and copper since 1953. This area is famous for Detour, Timmins, Rouen, and Val-d'Or, and more recently you've heard probably a lot about Osisko and Windfall Lake. I'm going to point that out because we see some similarities between what we're looking at developing at Croteau to what what's been happening in the Windfall area. So Croteau, our philosophy, I like to stake large. And the reason for that is we do our desktop studies and we identify systems. I hate going into established camps where you've got to elbow your way in and fight your way for little pieces of land. This is typical of what we stake. This is 20 kilometers east-west by about 10 kilometers north-south. It's in a great place to explore because we are to the south surrounded by communities here which are quite well versed in exploration and mining. We have a labyrinth of forestry roads throughout the property which allows us to do exploration year-round. There's a railhead, there's an airport, And there's a mill here in Chibougamau, which is only 22 kilometers by road to our resource that we're developing on the western edge of the property. Should also mention there's another mill associated with Metanor, or the Bachelor Lake project, down in Demeriville. That's only 150 kilometers away. So there is a demand for feed for both these mills, and we're nicely placed to be able to provide that going forward. So it's a great place to work. I will just mention, I'm not going to get into it today, but love to talk about it if you want to drop by my booth area. We spent the downturn spending a lot of time understanding gold emplacement mechanisms on the whole property. And what's really interesting about this property is that although we have already established an inferred resource here, there's multiple opportunities across the property to find additional ounces. And that's not an academic exercise because we found new showings and new opportunity through that prospecting program over the last 4 years. But the inferred resource. This is a plan view of it. It's quite a large body. It's a kilometer plus east-west, open along strike in both directions. In terms of size for this camp, it's quite wide. Most mineral deposits that have been exploited for gold in this camp are between 5 to 25 meters in width. This is 150 meters wide. We also know it's open at depth. Most of the drilling that we've done in this thing is down to about 350 meters. We have one hole that we put down to 575. It was mineralized from the surface right down to the bottom, where the company that did the modeling actually have recognized high-grade material at the bottom of the hole. Now, I'm going to be quite open and honest with you here. We didn't want this resource. This was done by an option or JV partner during the height of the downturn, if you can use those words to describe it. I wasn't keen on doing the deal. The old board was, but despite all that, we did get a resource of 640,000 ounces of gold. Problem with that resource is that it was based on an open pit model, which we believe strongly was never the case for this particular mineralized zone. The other things that they did not do or include in their model is that the upper 50 meters of material was never introduced in the model. So we see visible gold the size of your thumb at surface, channel samples running 97 grams per ton gold over a meter. That's a lot of ounces to leave outside of that model. The other thing they did not do was that we understood at this time, when this resource was being planned, there are at least 4 high-grade chutes that are embedded within this thing. The company only included 2, and these high-grade chutes are running as high as 75 grams per ton gold over 5 meters. Again, that's a lot of gold to leave out of your model. We now know from drilling that we've done recently, and I'll talk about in a moment, there's actually more of those high-grade chutes in here than just 4. Also, they based their model on this sheared basalt, greater than 0.3 grams. The high stuff is associated with QFP dikes, quartz veins, and what we call I2 dikes. So again, what I'm trying to communicate to you here is that 640,000 ounces is an incredibly conservative number, which we feel with a little bit of work we can push over 1 million ounces quite easily. So what did we do? Well, we took that $2 million that was given to us by those great people out of Montreal, and the one stipulation they said is that we want you to spend about half of it looking for gold outside the sandbox. So in other words, here's the mineralized zone in here. We want you to go on the other side of the fault over here and see if you can find more ounces in this area. So we started drilling, testing this particular area. We did find an extension of the CBSZ over here, but it did narrow to more widths that are quite typical of this camp. Again, as I said, 5 to 25 meters. So we were able to trace it over here. We also found another gold-bearing zone through here in the tufaceous sediments, over 340 meters long and again gold-bearing. Problem is, do you sink a lot of money trying to chase ounces out of new discoveries? We thought that it was best to go back into the CBSZ and build on what we already knew. Just mentioned down here as well, we again found more gold-bearing material. This is over 100 meters wide in brecciated material. Again, ounces, but again, only 3 holes in there. So we'd have to spend a lot of money to try and develop additional ounces in those areas. So let's go back to our CBSZ or mineralized zone. And let's focus on these high-grade chutes. We've been very transparent about these things. We've press released one that's actually being exposed at surface. So we knew an awful lot about the properties of these things in 2014. We focused on trying to understand the orientation and structural controls on the quartz veins, the dikes, and the, we call them intermediate plagioclase porphyry dikes, or I2 dikes. So we're using televiewer surveys to do this work, and we certainly now have a much better understanding of where these things are and where they go. We also did a lot of gold grade times thickness calculations, and the reason for that was largely to get a handle to compare to a model that's developing quite nicely in this camp, and that's the Osisko windfall model. I know this is a busy slide. However, I want to show you the incredible comparison between what we have at Kroto S here on the left versus what Osisko is putting out there on the right. I want to point out that their system is going down to over 2,000 meters. Ours is only at the 250 to 300 meter mark. Our grade times thickness values are as good, if not better, than reporting in the upper portion of Osisko's windfall project. Their stuff gets quite a bit richer with depth, and we know that happens down here too from the historic drilling that we've done, plus the drilling that we've just completed on site, which I'll talk about in a second. You'll notice we've got some very high-grade pods embedded within these high-grade chutes, some running greater than 127 grams per ton over 5 meters. That's pretty impressive. So we did phase 2 drilling. So this was 7 holes, about 2,700 meters of drilling, and we had some spectacular results. Bonanza grade, 72 grams over a meter, 11 grams over 9 meters, and even the lower grade stuff, 2 grams over almost 35 meters. And by the way, that's right at surface. More importantly, from my point of view, though, is that we're able to recognize previously unrecognized zones of mineralization, and we were able to start connecting the dots. So in the previous inferred resource, where you're looking at collar locations 50 meters apart over a space of 550 meters, we're now being able to get consistency in terms of understanding where these structures are going and where the mineralization is going. Very important, obviously, if you're looking at developing this into a mine. And, as I mentioned, more sources of mineralization have been identified. And here at depth, 500 meters, again, a spectacular intersection involving very coarse, nuggety gold at that depth. So what are we doing now? Well, phase 3 drilling is well underway. That's going to be over 5,000 meters of additional drilling, and we're all doing this on a very tight budget. We're looking at being able to increase the inferred resource and reporting on that sometime in the first half of 2018. So we're very excited about this project. We see it having a lot of upside, and of course with the infrastructure that's surrounding this project, there's great potential to move this program along quite quickly. So, moving from Kroto, the other one, and the one that I really love to talk about, is my Ti-pa-haa-kaa-ning or TPK project in northwestern Ontario. It's the property right there. I just throw this slide up to point out that we're only 150 kilometers away from Musselwhite at Goldcorp's operation, and we're only 50 kilometers due west of the Ring of Fire. And some of you, I'm sure, have heard of that, but there is going to be an awful lot of infrastructure development associated with those chromite deposits. We're only going to benefit from that. One of the roads proposed actually cuts right across the north part of the property, and some of the power line grids actually cross through the eastern side of the property. So although we've done a lot to reduce costs here in terms of exploration and development, that's only going to get better as time progresses. The property, keeping with the thesis of staking big, large property, 30 kilometers east-west by 20 north-south. We have a great relation with the local First Nation. In fact, I was just up there earlier in the week, community meeting, and these people are really looking forward to us getting back on the property and really moving this program forward. It's 100% Northern Superior, and you'll notice it's broken into annex, new growth, and big dam. And the reason why it was broken down was to accommodate an option agreement that I had with a company called Rainy River Resources back in 2010. Now, you may remember that company. They were taken out by New Gold in 2012. The deal with them was probably the sweetest option agreement I'd ever done up to this point. They had to spend $11 million over 3 years to earn a 51% interest just on this portion of the property. It's a lot of money to earn a 51% interest on a third of the property. They spent 10.5 before they got taken out, and I know they wanted to come back, not just because they told me so, but they made the last of 3 $500,000 payments into Northern Superior just before they got taken out, and they put 750 drums into my year-round camp over here to support the next drill program. So God love Ray Threckall. Thank you very much. I got the whole package back 100% after they spent $10.5 million on this. Why would anybody propose to do that kind of a deal on 51% of the property? It all comes down to these massive yellow dots that you see here. My back still hurts when I think about the number of till samples I took in here. Each dot represents a 10-kilogram sample of dirt. This is an absolute unique geological feature, and I challenge anybody in this room to find any junior with this kind of opportunity within its portfolio. This represents gold grains in the overburden. It's called a gold grain dispersal apron. It's coming from a shear zone at least 6 kilometers east-west with a dispersal over 11 kilometers. When you think of TPK, I need you to think of the Red Lake Gold District, because this is what we're starting to look like here. I also need you to think of the Hollinger mine. I know many of you have seen those beautiful photographs of the bedrock exposed within the shadow of the head frame, that beautiful gold mineralization at surface. That's the only way you can get that much gold in the surface environment. We're getting some samples that are running over 1,200 grains of gold. That's a lot of gold grains. 10 to 15, 10 to 25 gold grains in a 10-kilogram sample, that launches exploration programs. And the one thing that I can say with certainty in the geosciences, and we all know in this room you can't say much with certainty in the geosciences, is that you cannot get that much gold in the surface environment without significant gold mineralization right at the bedrock surface. There's no other way. So there's a lot of gold in there. On the corporate presentation on the website, I give 3 examples of gold grain dispersal trains in case you're not familiar with them. I'm just going to show TMAC and the Nartok deposit, again in a very remote area. Nice deposit here, beautiful dispersal train from that deposit. It's about 1 kilometer wide, and deposit's right in here. The point I'm making with this is that big dam apron, I love my marketing people and the terminology they use, is 6 times larger than what's shown here. So it's very significant what we've uncovered at TPK on the Big Dam area. 6 kilometers? Well, actually we think it extends 24 kilometers across the property. That's why I'm asking you to think of a large district play here. Know that from the geophysics. We know that from till sampling. This is arsenic in till, the discoloration. We know there's gold grains within till on the down ice side of this shear zone here. So you're looking at a large regional gold-bearing structure which crosses this area. We have a number of targets in here that have been identified remotely from our geophysical information, and they've never been tested either on prospecting, never mind drilling. The other thing you probably notice is this mass of dots here. Well, we only happen to uncover a second gold grain and till dispersal corridor. Now, I'm saying this tongue-in-cheek, it's only 3.5 kilometers wide. So this is, again, another very significant dispersal of gold. It happens to come right up to a mineralized body of essentially greenstone belt up here. And you can see the value of some of the boulders that are embedded within this dispersal corridor. Those are spectacular numbers in gold, silver, and copper. So this is a very different mineralized system than the one that I've just been talking about. So what do we do with all this? Well, it's a big property. Obviously, we have 2 large systems on it. So we invested $800,000 in the property this summer. We did some more work up in the annex area. And just to draw a comparison, boulders that were collected in the annex area and some of the grams per ton here, compare that to the Meliodine deposit, which is an excellent deposit. You can see here, almost 4 million ounces, 13.94 million tons at a grade of 7.44 grams per ton. Our values are much higher than the boulder population that was collected at Meliodine. Again, I've thrown up some silver and copper values, 2%, 2%, 2%, 3%, 2%. Those are very, very good copper values. So there's something very important sitting in this particular area, not just representing gold, but also copper. Also, more importantly, is that we've got targets. I'm not talking about cheese spread over a cracker of these high-grade boulders. They're actually coming from specific points on the ground. So we already have very specific targeting happening here. In the Big Dam area, again, we did more boulder sampling. Again, a comparison of gold values to that of being reported off of Meliodine. Again, great numbers, and again, great targeting in here. We put all this information together. We start coming up with very specific areas where we know there's significant mineralization. So targeting has already been set up in the Big Dam area, and we're going through that exercise right now in the annex area of the property. We also took the time to review and go through all the drill core, or at least 7 holes of it anyway, from what was produced from the Rainy River drill program in this area. And unfortunately, we found a lot of mistakes, and we were able to learn an awful lot from the work that had been done by Rainy River. And this isn't to slam that particular company. The reality is they were very focused on their Fort Frances project down in northwestern Ontario towards the US border, and they had a couple of very young geos that were unsupervised here doing the work. So we've learned an awful lot from resampling and also relogging those cores. So essentially what I'm trying to tell you is that they missed the targets on their first round. Despite that, I should also emphasize they had tremendous success. You know, 25.9 grams per ton gold over 13.5 meters isn't a bad intersection in a drill program. So lots happening here. So what are we doing? Well, right now we're completing phase 3 drilling on our Croix West program in Quebec. We have 4 drills on site. Update the inferred resource in the first half of 2018. We'll complete drill target selection on the TPK area in both the annex and the Big Dam area. And I want to emphasize again that that transition at the corporate level is ongoing. So we'll continue with a very aggressive marketing program that we started in November of 2016. But we also engaged a financial institution out of Toronto to help us identify a strategic partner to help us move some of these projects forward. So that's Northern Superior. It's a small company with 2 large opportunities within its portfolio, and we really look forward to getting back to exploration and moving both these projects on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.